Hello, good morning, Year 8, and welcome to your third lesson on the African American Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. Our key inquiry question, of course, is why has Robert F. Williams been forgotten? Of course, that was a slightly oblique question, not the sort of question you would expect in a civil rights history inquiry. One perhaps might be focused on Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks or some of the key figures, but of course we have looked at them in our attempt to narrow down the historical significance of this individual who we are gradually learning had a major part to play in the civil rights movement, perhaps not as great as that held by Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, but certainly enough to merit inclusion in that history book that we looked at in the first lesson, Better Day Coming. So why has he been erased from that narrative? And that's our sort of historical focus for this inquiry. All right, I'm going to start you off with an image. I want you to have a look at this. Pause, study it, reflect. You're familiar with this kind of exclusionary sign. What you're not familiar with is who it's excluding. So I want you to have a look at that sign and just answer that question. Does this picture show that life was good for African Americans in Memphis? Memphis is in Tennessee, in the South. It was a state that had segregation right up until the 1960s when the federal government made it illegal. But does this actually show that life was good for African Americans in this town? It says no white people allowed in the zoo today. All right. So pause the video, write your answer. Of course, your question this lesson is protesting segregation. All right, you'll find that in the lesson post. So once you've got that and the date, today's the 8th, you can begin to answer that question in a short paragraph explaining why you think that and using evidence from the photo to support your explanation. All right, I think now we're ready to move on. So, as you say, there's the title, Protesting Against Segregation, the Civil Rights Movement, and we are now in the same state as we ended last lesson. Both Robert F. Williams and the first major protest against segregation happened in the same state in the United States, and that is North Carolina. Now, we know that Robert F. Williams is from a fairly small town south of Charlotte called Monroe, but we're going to be looking today at the events that took place in a place called Greensboro. And Greensboro was really the sort of the beginning, the birthplace of the civil rights movement. Another place is Montgomery, where Rosa Parks famously refused to give up her seat. All right, so what I want you to do is to go into the YouTube channel and open up video 1. And video 1 will give you an overview of the Greensboro 1960 student sit-ins. These 4 young men were refused a meal at a Woolworth's lunch counter. They weren't refused a meal. They were told they could eat it so long as they ate it outside on the pavement, because they were not allowed to eat inside on the basis of their color. And they said no. And they sat in the restaurant and refused to leave, and that's why it's called a sit-in. It's a type of protest. So, watching the video, just answer that question. So, write subheading there, Greensboro, North Carolina, 1960, the start of the sit-ins, and then how did the students try to get people to end segregation? All right. And then just answer that question as well. Were the student protesters in any real danger during the sit-ins? And by danger, I mean at real fear of risking life or limb. All right. Now that we've seen what it was like to protest in Greensboro, North Carolina, we're going to work out and try to understand what it was like to protest a few miles south in Monroe, North Carolina. All right. So your answers to the last questions were perhaps it was dangerous. You know, they took a few slaps and punches, and some of them had ketchup thrown over them. One lady, as you can see, said she had a box of matches thrown down her poncho. And of course, that is, abhorrent violence, but not the sort of violence that you would associate with a mortal threat to your life. So, this is what Monroe was like. Quite different. It's a few years earlier, about 25 years before that. Um, but this is an incident from Robert F. Williams' life, and he used to repeat this story wherever he went. Whenever people said to him, "Why are you the way you are?" and he'd say to them, "I'll tell you why I am the way I am, because I witnessed this as a child, and it had an indelible effect on my psyche, my outlook on life." So have a read through of this. Yeah, read through that. Okay, and then answer the question. Explain how this incident might have affected a young Robert F. Williams. It's a deeply powerful story that he would tell, and he would tell it often. But what impact would it have had on him as a young man? All right, now the final thing I'd like you all to do is I'd like you to uh, watch video 3, and for video 3, you need to answer this question. Would it be more dangerous protesting against segregation in Monroe than in Greensboro or Nashville, Tennessee? All right. And then your final task is, once you've seen that video, there's a man at the end, a newscaster, who said that Monroe was an incident waiting to happen. Who did he blame, and was this accurate? All right. Good luck. When you have completed all your questions, make sure they're well ordered, and you need to take a picture and upload it to the assignment tab for this lesson. Good luck. Bye.